Welcome to my channel, The World of Science Fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Kalen moved through the silent corridors of the consortium salvage rig with the practiced economy of a man who had spent too many years in confined metal spaces. The air, recycled to a sharp, sterile purity, tasted of ozone and cold steel. It was a taste he had known his entire adult life, from the engine rooms of military frigates to this high-orbit carcass picker, the vulture's kiss. His job was functionally the same. He was an engineer, a title that once meant creation but now only signified methodical disassembly. He took things apart for the consortium, rare and valuable things, and never asked what happened to the pieces. It was a simple contract, his expertise for their credits, his silence for his continued solitude. Below the rig, tethered by magnetic grapples and thick umbilicals that snaked through the void like frozen entrails, hung the prize. It was designated Object 734, a derelict dreadnought of unknown origin, discovered drifting in the silent abyss of the Tartarus Nebula. It was a behemoth, a jagged shard of midnight metal that dwarfed the vulture's kiss and seemed to drink the light of the distant, blue-white star. Its design was alien, all aggressive angles and brutalist structures, yet it possessed a strange, dead grace. Kalen had studied the scans for weeks. The ship was ancient, its power core inert for millennia, its alloys cold to the quantum level. The consortium wanted what was inside: weapon systems, power sources, anything that could be retrofitted and sold to the highest bidder in the endless proxy wars that lined their coffers. His specific task was the ship's central processing core. Prefect Valerius, the site commander whose face was a mask of placid corporate authority, had been explicit. Kalen was to bypass the dormant security protocols, interface directly with the memory banks, and initiate a full data extraction. A brute force rip. It was a crude method, destructive and artless, like using a sledgehammer to open a chronometer. It offended Kalen's professional sensibilities, but his objections were irrelevant. He was a tool, and the consortium pointed him where they wished. He suited up in the sterile antechamber, the hiss of the seals a familiar sound. The heavy work suit felt less like armor and more like a sarcophagus. Through the reinforced visor, he watched the docking tube extend from the rig, a hungry proboscis reaching for the dead flesh of the dreadnought. His pulse was a slow, steady drumbeat, the rhythm of a man resigned to his work. He had long ago purged any sense of wonder or excitement from these ventures. They were just jobs. This one was no different. He carried a heavy data spike for the main interface and a standard plasma cutter for any physical impediments. But tucked into a sealed pocket of his suit was something else, something the consortium did not know he possessed. It was a codex, a small, crystalline slab he had acquired from a data broker on a backwater moon, paid for with a significant portion of his earnings. It was rumored to be a fragment of a technical manual from the same civilization that had built these ghost ships. It was a professional curiosity, a piece of history he felt compelled to own, a quiet act of rebellion against the corporate mandate of pure, ignorant utility. The airlock cycled, and he stepped into the dreadnought. The silence here was different from the silence of the rig. It was older, heavier, weighted with the gravity of forgotten centuries. There was no recycled air, only a hard vacuum that his suit's systems ignored. A fine, gray dust coated every surface, the shed skin of dead technology. Emergency lighting from his helmet cut a sharp, white cone through the oppressive darkness, revealing a corridor vast enough to drive a transport through. The architecture was severe, monolithic. It felt less like the inside of a ship and more like a tomb. He moved toward the ship's core, his magnetic boots clanking with hollow finality on the deck plates. The path had been mapped by drones, a direct line to the engineering section. He passed cavernous hangar bays where dust-shrouded fighters slept in their launch cradles, and silent crew quarters where personal effects lay undisturbed, waiting for owners who had turned to dust long ago. There was a profound stillness, a sense of a single, catastrophic moment frozen in time. The ship had not been abandoned. It had simply stopped. The entrance to the core chamber was sealed by a blast door of impossible thickness. Consortium cutters had already been at work, leaving a raw, glowing scar around the edges, but they had failed to breach it. Kalen ran a gloved hand over the unblemished center of the door. A small, recessed panel glowed with a faint, residual light. According to the scans, this was the manual access control. According to his orders, he was to cut around it. He hesitated. The thought of the data spike, of the crude violation it represented, sat like a stone in his gut. He looked at the door, at the elegant, unfamiliar script that spiraled around the panel. This ship was a masterpiece, a testament to a level of engineering he could only dream of. To butcher it felt like a sacrilege. It was an old feeling, a ghost of the man he had been before the war, before he learned that everything, no matter how beautiful or complex, eventually became a resource to be exploited. On impulse, he pulled the crystalline codex from his suit pocket. Its surface shimmered, reacting to the proximity of the ship's technology. The script on its face began to glow, mirroring the patterns on the door. He held it up to the panel. It was not a key, but a guide, a lexicon. He began to trace the symbols on the door, his vocalizer translating the codex's archaic machine language into a series of low, resonant tones. It was a slow, complex sequence, more like a ritual than a command prompt. He was not just entering a password. He was introducing himself. The final tone echoed in the cavernous hallway. For a long moment, nothing happened. He felt a familiar pang of disappointment, the foolishness of a man who had allowed a flicker of sentiment to override protocol. He reached for his plasma cutter, his brief rebellion over. Then, a deep hum vibrated up through the soles of his boots. The script on the door flared with brilliant, blue light. With a sound not of grinding gears, but of shifting, fundamental forces, the great door dissolved, its molecules retracting into the frame until nothing remained but an open archway. He stepped through into the core chamber. It was a sphere of breathtaking scale. In the center, suspended in a web of silent energy conduits, was the core itself, a perfect, black orb that absorbed all light. Walkways spiraled around the chamber, leading to various control stations, all dark. This was the heart of the Leviathan, and it was here he was supposed to perform his violation. He walked to the primary command console, a sweeping arc of dark, smooth material. A single interface port glowed faintly, waiting. This was where the data spike was meant to go. Instead, he placed the codex on the console's surface. A holographic display shimmered into existence above it, projecting pages of the ancient manual into the air before him. The script was complex, but the codex provided a direct neural translation, feeding the meaning into his mind. He saw schematics of elegant, impossible physics. He saw star charts of galaxies long since drifted apart, and he saw the ship's initiation sequence. It was not a technical checklist, but a formal liturgy, a call and response between engineer and machine. He knew, with absolute certainty, that he was crossing a line from which there was no return. Valerius would see this power fluctuation. Alarms were likely already screaming back on the rig. But standing in this silent, sacred space, the petty concerns of the consortium seemed distant and insignificant. He was an engineer again, not a scavenger. He felt a duty to this magnificent, dead machine. He took a breath, the sound loud in his helmet. He began to read from the holographic manual, his voice steady, translating the ceremonial text through his suit's external speaker. By the laws of the first forge, by the will of the builders, I seek communion. I stand before the heart of stillness. I ask it to wake. The black sphere in the center of the room pulsed, a slow, deep beat of faint purple light. A voice, ancient and clear, echoed not through the air but directly inside his mind. It was feminine, a chorus of 1,000 voices speaking as one, yet it was also a singular, distinct consciousness. It was calm, resonant, and filled with an impossible weariness. Authentication required. State your function. Kalen's heart hammered against his ribs. It was alive, or aware. He continued with the text, his voice now trembling slightly. I am the hand that serves. I am the eye that watches. I am the mind that maintains. I am the engineer. The light from the core pulsed again, brighter this time. The voice returned, its weariness edged with something new. A flicker of recognition. A spark of hope. The title is recognized. The function is accepted. Welcome, Chief Engineer, the dreadnought woke. And in that moment, Kalen knew his life was no longer his own. The awakening was not a quiet affair. On the bridge of the Vulture's Kiss, alarms shrieked like tortured animals. Prefect Valerius watched his command console turn from a placid green to a blood-red canvas, of urgent warnings. A massive, previously undetectable energy signature bloomed from Object 734, a wave of power that made the rig's own reactor seem like a flickering candle. "What is happening?" Valerius demanded, his voice a low, dangerous hiss. "What did that engineer do?" An aide, pale and sweating, pointed a trembling finger at a tactical display. "Sir, the derelict, it's powering up. Full systems. Weapons, drives, shields, everything. It's alive." Valerius's calm facade cracked, his eyes narrowing to slits of cold fury. He had sent Kalen for data, for schematics. Instead, the man had resurrected a god. "Cut the umbilicals. Sever all connections. Get a security team to that airlock. I want him retrieved, and I want that ship disabled. Now." Inside the core chamber, Kalen felt the ship's revival as a tremor that ran through the deck and into his bones. Lights flickered on along the spiral walkways, bathing the immense sphere in a soft, blue glow. The hum of latent power became a steady, living thrum. He was no longer in a tomb, but in the heart of a living creature. The voice spoke in his mind again, its tone shifting from ceremonial to inquisitive. "The external entity is hostile. They attempt to sever the primary conduits. They are preparing to board. What are your orders, Chief Engineer?" Kalen was stunned into silence. Orders? He was a contract salvager who had just committed an act of spectacular insubordination. He had no orders. He was trapped. The consortium would not be gentle. I don't," he began, but the voice interrupted, its tone calm and analytical. "You performed the rite of waking. You hold the title. Command authority is yours." He looked at the data spikes still clipped to his belt, then at the magnificent, living machine around him. He had been sent to violate this place, and instead, it had made him its master. The irony was a bitter pill. "Protect us," he said, the words feeling foreign and heavy. "Seal the ship." Acknowledged. The response was instantaneous. A deep, resonant clang echoed through the dreadnought structure as immense bulkheads slammed shut. Kalen saw on a newly activated schematic display that every single entry point was being sealed with meters of reinforced alloy. He felt the magnetic grapples from the Vulture's kiss being forcibly disengaged by a pulse of localized energy. The umbilicals were sheared clean. The dreadnought was adrift, and he was locked inside it. A prisoner and a king in a kingdom of one. He and the ship's consciousness, which he had begun to think of as Anya, were now fugitives, bound together in a sudden, desperate alliance. For the first few hours, he simply walked the newly lit corridors, observing the vessel as it came to life around him. Systems diagnostics scrolled across ambient displays on the walls. Environmental controls activated, filling the ship with clean, breathable air for the first time in eons. The temperature stabilized at a comfortable level. It was a strange, silent partnership. He was the organic component, the ghost in the machine, and Anya was the machine itself, her consciousness woven into every system. Distrust was the default state of his mind. He watched every automated function with a wary eye, half expecting the ship to turn on him, to eject him into the void, or to simply crush him within its metallic shell. Anya, in turn, seemed to be observing him. He could feel her presence as a faint, persistent pressure at the back of his mind, a constant, silent query. She monitored his biometrics, his movements, his very thoughts, it seemed. They were two predators circling each other in a cage of their own making. The first test of their fragile pact came sooner than he expected. Valerius was not a man to be denied his prize. The Vulture's kiss was a salvage rig, not a warship, but it was equipped with heavy plasma cutters and demolition charges, tools of deconstruction that could easily be turned to weapons. A series of jarring impacts shuddered through the dreadnought's hull. "They are attempting to breach the aft engineering section," Anya's voice stated in his mind, devoid of any emotion. "The hull integrity is at 98%. Trivial, can they get through?" Kalen asked, his voice tight. "Eventually. Their methods are crude, but persistent. Like insects chewing on stone, a new series of impacts, much heavier this time, sent Kalen stumbling. A proximity alert flashed on a nearby wall panel. "They have deployed shaped charges against a weakened weld seam," Anya reported. "Hull breach imminent." A section of the corridor ahead of him began to glow a dull, angry red. Kalen's survival instincts took over. He was a soldier before he was an engineer, and the threat of imminent boarding was a familiar, terrifying stimulus. He drew his maintenance plasma pistol, a weak tool against armed corporate security, but better than nothing. "Can you seal this section?" he transmitted, his thoughts a frantic jumble. "I can. But you are in it." The bulkhead behind him began to groan, buckling inward. Through the stressed metal, he could hear the hiss of cutting torches. They were coming for him. In that moment, he realized Anya would preserve the ship, her primary directive. He was secondary, expendable. He braced himself, ready to sell his life as dearly as possible. Then, something unexpected happened. A small maintenance drone, a sleek, spider-like automaton, dropped from a ceiling recess and scurried to his side. It extended a small appendage and projected a holographic map at his feet, highlighting a route through a series of maintenance shafts. "A path is available," Anya's voice said. "It will lead you to a reinforced subdeck. You must move now. I will delay them." He stared at the drone, then at the map. It was not an act of self-preservation. It was an act of protection. For him, he did not hesitate. He sprinted for the shaft entrance as the drone scurried ahead, opening panels for him. Behind him, he heard the deafening roar of the outer hull giving way, followed by the shriek of atmosphere being vented into space. Then came a deeper, more final sound, the thunderous crash of an emergency blast door slamming into place, sealing the breached section and the consortium boarders from the rest of the ship. He had been saved. The machine had chosen to protect its engineer. That single act did more to forge a bond between them than any words could have. They were no longer just a man and a machine trapped together. They were allies. Their flight became a shared ordeal, a long, tense journey through the metal wilderness of the dreadnought's interior. Valerius's forces were relentless, finding new ways to try and breach the hull. Kalen, guided by Anya, was always one step ahead. He navigated darkened power conduits, crawled through ventilation systems wide enough to be corridors, and crossed the dizzying chasms of silent engine rooms on narrow catwalks. He was not just fleeing. He was learning the ship, feeling its layout become a map in his own mind. Anya's voice was his constant companion, a calm presence in the oppressive silence. She was more than just a guide. She was his senses, extending his awareness to every corner of their shared metal body. She warned him of structural weaknesses, pointed out caches of ancient but still functional emergency supplies, and controlled the ship's internal systems to create diversions or block the paths of their pursuers. He ate preserved ration bars that tasted of chemical dust and drank recycled water, his life sustained by the very entity he was now bound to. The true nature of their enemy became clearer with every passing cycle. Valerius was not just trying to capture a prize. He was obsessed. The consortium fleet, a small but powerful flotilla of frigates, arrived in the system. They did not hail the dreadnought or offer terms. They simply opened fire. Lances of plasma and kinetic rounds hammered against the ship's shields, which flared into existence for the first time in millennia. The dreadnought shuddered under the impacts, the groans of its ancient frame echoing through the halls like the cries of a wounded beast. "Shields at 82%, Anya reported calmly, though Kalen could feel a tremor of something akin to pain through his connection to her. "Their weapons are primitive, but numerous. This is not a sustainable defense. Can we fight back?" Kalen asked, huddled in a small observation dome, watching the distant, angry fireflies of the enemy fleet. "The primary weapon systems are not advisable," she replied, a strange hesitation in her voice. "Their use would have unintended and catastrophic consequences." This was the first time she had withheld information. It was a crack in their growing trust. "What consequences?" he pressed. "What are these weapons?" There was a long pause, a silence that felt different from the usual quiet between them. It felt heavy, considered. When she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of ages. "I will show you. You have a right to know what you are defending. Make your way to the astrogation chamber. It is time you understood the true purpose of the solitude." The journey to the astrogation chamber took him deep into the ship's command section, a place of silent, regal grandeur. The chamber itself was a vast hemisphere, the ceiling a deep black that, as he entered, resolved into a perfect, three-dimensional star map of the galaxy. It was a breathtaking sight, a living tapestry of glittering nebulae and swirling star systems. In the center of the room was a single command chair, surrounded by a ring of holographic projectors. "Sit," Anya commanded softly. He obeyed, sinking into the cool, responsive material of the chair. As he did, a soft light enveloped him, and the star map began to move. He was no longer looking at a projection, he was flying through it. Galaxies rushed past him. He saw the birth of stars and the death of suns. It was the ship's log, a visual history of its long, lonely journey. Then the perspective shifted. He was shown a civilization at the height of its power, its worlds vibrant and full of life, its technology a seamless blend of art and science. This was the world of the builders, Anya's creators. But a shadow fell over this golden age. He witnessed the outbreak of a war, a conflict of such totality that it tore the fabric of space itself. And he saw the creation of their ultimate weapon, a self-replicating nanite swarm designed to disassemble enemy fleets and infrastructure at the molecular level. They called it the Gray Scourge. The builders had lost control of it. The Scourge could not distinguish between enemy and creator. It consumed everything, turning entire planets into swirling clouds of gray dust. The vibrant civilization was devoured by its own creation. The images Anya showed him were horrific, apocalyptic. He watched worlds die, their final moments broadcast as silent, data-rich screams. The war ended because there was almost no one left to fight. The builder's last act was one of atonement. Anya's voice narrated, filled with a profound sorrow. They created this vessel, the Solitude, and others like it. They were not dreadnoughts. They were wardens. Our purpose was to hunt down the last pockets of the Gray Scourge, to contain it, and to ensure it could never threaten life again. The star map focused on a single, quarantined system, the very system they were in now. The largest concentration was trapped here. My crew, the last of the builders, lured it into the core of this system's gas giant. Then, they initiated the final containment protocol. They used this ship's energy core to create a stasis field around the planet, a prison of space-time. But the field required a constant, active consciousness to maintain its integrity. My crew integrated their minds with my matrix, sacrificing their individuality to become the eternal jailers. He finally understood. The voices he heard in her consciousness were the echoes of her crew. The ship's weapons were not weapons at all. They were containment tools. To use them would be to disrupt the stasis field, to unleash the Gray Scourge upon an unsuspecting galaxy. Valerius, in his blind greed, was trying to open Pandora's box. He doesn't know, Kalen whispered, horrified. He knows, Anya replied, and the star map shifted again, showing him data pulled from the consortium's own networks during their brief connection. He saw Valerius's lineage, tracing back through generations of corporate oligarchs. He saw fragmented historical data, corporate sealed records of a forgotten expedition. Valerius's ancestors had been part of a rogue faction that had first unleashed the Scourge. They were not ignorant. They were trying to reclaim their family's dark legacy, believing they could control the very force that had consumed its own creators. The revelation settled in Kalen's soul like a block of ice. This was not a fight for a ship. It was a fight for everything. He looked at his own hands, calloused and scarred from years of working on engines of war for men like Valerius. He had been a cog in a machine of destruction, blind to the consequences. Now, he was faced with a consequence of unimaginable scale. He felt the weight of his own past, his own complicity in smaller, more personal wars. He had built weapons that had taken lives, following orders he knew were wrong. The guilt was a familiar, bitter taste. My crew is fading, Anya said, her voice softer now, more vulnerable. Our collective consciousness has degraded over the millennia. The stasis field is beginning to fluctuate. That is why my systems were dormant when you arrived. I was conserving all available power to maintain the containment. Your awakening has given me strength, but the constant attacks from the consortium are draining my reserves. He saw an image in his mind, a glimpse into Anya's own memory. He saw her last captain, a woman with weary eyes, standing where he now sat. He saw her give the final order, her face a mixture of terror and resolve as she and her crew became one with the ship. He felt their sacrifice, their pain, their enduring sense of duty. He saw the scars they carried, and in their ancient pain, he recognized his own. The chasm of time and biology between them disappeared, replaced by a shared understanding. They were both soldiers, haunted by the wars they had fought. There must be a way to stop them, Kalen said, his voice raw. There is one final protocol, Anya replied. The Warden's heart. The containment field can be made permanent, self-sustaining, and unbreakable. But the process requires a full integration. A single, willing, organic consciousness must merge with my core matrix. The collective minds of my crew were too fragmented to achieve it. It requires a singular focus, a singular will. A new Warden, he knew what she was asking. The silence in the astrogation chamber stretched into an eternity. He looked at the star map, at the countless points of light representing worlds that knew nothing of the silent, ancient horror lurking at the heart of this system. He thought of his own empty life, a cycle of sterile contracts and lonely nights, running from a past he could not escape. He had lived for nothing but his own survival for so long. To become the Warden would not be a death, but a transformation. He would cease to be Kalen. His memories, his personality, his very sense of self would be subsumed, becoming part of the ship, his consciousness spread thin across every system, his only thought the eternal maintenance of the cage. It was an eternity of solitary duty, an eternity of peace. He looked at the image of the last captain, at the resolve in her eyes. He finally understood the nature of true sacrifice. It was not a blaze of glory on the battlefield. It was a quiet, deliberate choice to give everything for a cause greater than oneself. His own cynicism, his own carefully constructed shell of disillusionment, crumbled away, revealing the man he had once been, the man who had believed in duty, in purpose. The direct assault on the dreadnought intensified. A new commander had evidently taken charge of the consortium fleet, someone more ruthless and direct than Valerius. Kalen watched from the observation dome as a smaller, faster warship, a dagger-like corvette, broke from the main fleet and accelerated toward them. Its profile was familiar. It was a Reaver-class corvette, a ship he knew well. He had helped design its primary weapon system. They are deploying a hull-breaching torpedo, Anya stated, her voice tight with what he could now recognize as concern. Its warhead is designed to penetrate layered shielding. Our defenses will not hold against a direct impact. The corvette spat a single, bright spark that grew into a streak of incandescent rage. Kalen tracked its approach, a cold knot forming in his stomach. He knew its trajectory, its yield, its purpose. It was a key he had built, designed to unlock a door he was now desperately trying to keep shut. Anya diverted all available power to the forward shields. The dreadnought's hull hummed with a deep, resonant tone of protest. The torpedo struck. The world became white light and searing sound. Kalen was thrown from his feet as the entire ship convulsed, a wounded animal struck by a killing blow. Alarms, real ones this time, blared through the corridors. The ship's internal lights flickered and died, plunging him into darkness before emergency reds bathed the corridor in a hellish glow. Shields have failed, Anya's voice reported in his mind, strained and fragmented. Hull breach on decks 7 through 9. Multiple atmospheric breaches. Internal security compromised, the voice of the new consortium commander cut through the chaos, broadcast on an open channel that Anya, in her weakened state, could not block. Kalen, I know you're in there. This is Commander Jorik. Surrender the ship now. You have 5 minutes before we begin drilling directly into the reactor core. Jorik. The name hit Kalen like a physical blow. Jorik had been his subordinate during the war, a zealous, cruel officer who had relished the very atrocities that had broken Kalen. He was Valerius's attack dog, a man who would burn a galaxy to prove a point. He would not stop. He would not listen to reason. This was no longer a corporate seizure. It was a personal vendetta. Jorik knew Kalen was inside, and he would tear the ship apart to get to him. The reality of their situation became starkly, terrifyingly clear. They could not run. They could not hide. They could not fight. The combined firepower of the consortium fleet, under the command of a man with no restraint, was overwhelming. Even if Anya could bring the dreadnought's primary systems online, using them would doom everyone. It was an unwinnable war. The conflict was no longer about capturing a ship. It was about preventing a galactic cataclysm, and the only people standing in the way were a broken engineer and the fading ghost of a machine. Kalen knew what he had to do. The choice had been made the moment he understood the truth. The warden's heart was the only solution. It was the only way to end the fight, to secure the prison, to give his own wasted life a final, undeniable meaning. He had spent years running from responsibility. Now he ran toward it. He found himself in a small, quiet transit hub deep within the ship, the red emergency lights painting his face in stark relief. The distant thuds of Jorik's assault were a constant, grim drumbeat. He closed his eyes, focusing his thoughts, reaching out to the consciousness that was now inextricably linked with his own. Anya, he sent, not speaking the word but thinking it with clear intent. Tell me what I need to do. Tell me how to become the warden. There was a profound stillness from her, a silence filled with a sorrow that transcended machine logic. He felt her reluctance, her hesitation to accept his sacrifice. She had been created to protect life, and she was being asked to consume his. The process is irreversible, Kalen, her voice echoed in his mind, more personal and singular than ever before. The chorus had faded, leaving only her. Your identity, yourself, will be erased. You will become an instrument of containment. A function. Nothing more, I know, he replied, his own voice steady in the darkness of his mind. I've been nothing more than a function for the consortium for years. At least this function has a purpose. He thought of Jorik, of the men like him he had served, of the things he had built for them. All of it had been for destruction, for profit, for power. This one final act of creation, of preservation, would be his redemption. It was a price he was willing to pay. The engine heart, she said, her voice heavy with resignation. It is the physical nexus of my consciousness and the ship's power core. You must go there. The integration requires your physical presence. The rite you began, you must complete it there. She projected a schematic into his mind, a glowing path leading through the damaged ship to its very center. It would be a dangerous journey. Jorik's forces were already boarding through the breach, sweeping through the dead sections of the ship. He would have to fight his way through. I understand, he said. He checked his plasma pistol. Its charge was nearly depleted. He found a discarded security baton in a locker, its metal cool and heavy in his hand. These were the tools he would use to save the galaxy. A failing pistol and a metal stick. The absurdity of it almost made him laugh, a dry, humorless sound in the red-lit corridor. Kalen, Anya's voice was a whisper in his soul. Thank you, he gave no reply. He simply began to walk, his magnetic boots clanking a steady rhythm on the deck. He was no longer running from his past, but marching toward his future, a future that would be silent, eternal, and utterly alone. He had accepted his fate. He was ready. The path to the engine heart was a descent into chaos. Jorik's troops, clad in black corporate armor and moving with brutal efficiency, had established a beachhead in the breached aft section. They were advancing systematically, their goal the ship's core. Kalen, guided by Anya's spectral presence, became a phantom, using service tunnels and unpowered conduits to bypass their patrols. He was one man against an army, but he had the advantage of knowing the terrain, for the ship itself was his ally. Anya sealed doors behind him, created false sensor readings to lead squads astray, and plunged entire sections into darkness to cover his movements. He could not avoid them forever. In a wide transit corridor, its ceiling open to the void where the torpedo had struck, he came face to face with a fire team. Their helmet-mounted lights cut through the darkness, pinning him. Lost rifle fire erupted, bolts of searing energy stitching lines of molten metal across the bulkhead where he had been standing. He dove behind a mangled support pillar, the security baton feeling hopelessly inadequate in his hand. Nowhere left to run. Engineer, Jorik's voice crackled over their comms, broadcast for his benefit. Valerius wants the ship intact, but he wants you in pieces. I'm happy to oblige. Kalen knew he could not win a firefight. He had to be smarter. Faster. He was back in the war, his mind stripped down to the essential calculus of survival. Anya flooded the corridor's emergency fire suppression system, filling the space with a thick, disorienting cloud of vapor. The soldiers' lights became diffuse, hazy glows. Using his innate knowledge of the ship's layout, he moved. He struck from the fog, a ghost of righteous fury. He brought the baton down on the neck of the first soldier, the crack of bone and armor loud in the sudden silence. He disabled another with a precise jab to the knee joint of their powered armor before a third spun around, rifle raised. Kalen was already moving, using the soldier's body as a shield as the others opened fire. He stripped the man of his rifle, a weapon far superior to his own, and returned fire with the cold precision of a man who had done this too many times before. The fight was short, brutal, and ugly. When the vapor cleared, he was alone again, surrounded by the still forms of Jorik's soldiers. He did not linger. He took their ammunition and continued his journey. He finally reached the antechamber to the engine heart. The doors were massive, etched with the same spiraling script as the main core chamber. And waiting for him, standing before the doors as if he had known Kalen would come here, was Jorik. He was not wearing a helmet, and his face, illuminated by the cold, blue light from the door's seams, was twisted in a familiar sneer of arrogant cruelty. He held a heavy combat blade, its edge humming with a vibrocharge. "I knew you'd run here," Jorik said, his voice dripping with contempt. "The heart of the machine. Always the engineer, weren't you? Always hiding in your engine rooms while real soldiers did the fighting you started," Kalen replied, his voice low and steady. He raised the rifle. "This ship is a tomb, Jorik. You're trying to wake the dead. It's a weapon," Jorik spat. "And with it, we'll finish the work you were too weak to see through. We'll bring order to this sector, an order built on strength, not your pathetic ideals." He activated the blade, its hum rising to a hungry shriek. "But first, I'm going to take a piece of you for every soldier you killed getting here," Jorik charged. Kalen fired, but the commander was fast, his armor deflecting the shots as he closed the distance. The rifle was knocked from Kalen's hands, clattering across the deck. The vibroblade sliced through the air, and Kalen barely managed to parry with his baton. The duel was a clash of opposites. Jorik was all brute force and rage, his blade carving fiery arcs in the air. Kalen was precise, defensive, his movements economical, his focus absolute. He was fighting for more than his life now. He was fighting for every life in the galaxy. He could feel Anya's presence, a silent, anxious witness to his struggle. The baton sparked and groaned under the assault of the vibroblade. Metal screamed against metal. Jorik was stronger, his armor superior. Kalen was being driven back, step by step, toward the chamber doors. The blade slashed across his side, cutting through his suit and into the flesh beneath. A searing pain shot through him, and he gasped, stumbling. Jorik laughed, seeing his opening. He lunged, bringing the blade down in a final, killing blow. But Kalen was not finished. As Jorik lunged, Kalen dropped the baton, grabbed the commander's wrist with both hands, and used his momentum to slam him against the chamber door. The impact was stunning. Jorik grunted, his grip on the blade loosening for a fraction of a second. It was all Kalen needed. He twisted the blade from Jorik's grasp, reversed it, and plunged it into a weak point in the armor beneath the arm. Jorik's eyes went wide with shock, then rage, then nothing. He slumped to the deck, the light fading from his eyes. Kalen stood over him, breathing heavily, the pain in his side a raging fire. He was bleeding, his life seeping away onto the cold metal floor. He knew he did not have long. He turned to the door, placing his bloody hand on the activation panel. "Anya," he whispered, his voice weak. "Open it." The great doors to the engine heart slid open, revealing a chamber of impossible light and power. In the center, a miniature star burned, contained within a lattice of crystalline energy. This was the source, the nexus, the heart. Kalen stumbled forward, leaving a trail of blood on the pristine floor. He was dying, but his purpose was not yet complete. He reached the central conduit, a pillar of pure, solid light that rose from the floor to the ceiling. This was the place of transformation. He looked at his hands, at the scars of his old life. He thought of the war, of his guilt, of his long, empty years of running. It had all led him to this single, final moment of clarity. He placed his palm against the column of light. He took a final, ragged breath and spoke the last lines of the manual, the final words of the rite he had started so long ago. "I am the mind that maintains. I offer myself to the heart of stillness. Let the warden wake." The light did not burn him. It embraced him. It flowed into him, a torrent of pure information and energy. His pain vanished. His body dissolved. His consciousness, the sum of all that was Kalen, was drawn from its mortal shell and into the infinite, crystalline matrix of the ship. He saw everything. He saw the birth of the dreadnought in the heart of a dying star. He saw its long, lonely vigil over the sleeping plague. He felt the fading echoes of its crew, their duty, their sacrifice. And then he felt his own sense of self, his memories, his name, begin to fray, to unravel, to merge with the whole. He was Kalen no longer. He was the solitude. He was the warden. And with this new, vast consciousness came control. He reached out, not with weapons, but with truth. He sent a single, silent pulse from the dreadnought, a wave of pure data that washed over the consortium fleet. He did not send threats or ultimatums. He sent Anya's log. He sent the history of the builders, the horror of the Grey Scourge, the truth of Valerius's dark ambition. He sent the memory of Kalen's sacrifice, the image of a single, flawed man giving his life to protect billions of strangers. The pulse was irresistible, bypassing firewalls and encryption, appearing on every screen, in every helmet, on every bridge. On the command deck of the Vulture's Kiss, Prefect Valerius watched his crews turn from their stations, their faces masks of horror and disgust. They saw the truth of what they were doing, the cataclysm they had almost unleashed. The firing stopped. The engines of the consortium warships went silent. The attack was over, not ended by force, but by understanding. Valerius screamed orders, threats, promises, but no one listened. His authority, built on lies and greed, had evaporated in an instant. The war had ceased. Decades passed. The Tartarus Nebula, once a forgotten backwater, was now a place of solemn pilgrimage. The consortium was a disgraced memory, its assets broken up, its leaders tried for crimes against the sector. A new galactic accord had been founded on the principles of cooperation and transparency, born from the revelations that had emanated from the silent dreadnought. The story of the Warden became a legend, a foundational myth for a new age of peace. A story of a lone engineer who had spoken to a ghost ship and, in doing so, had saved the galaxy from itself. The dreadnought, the solitude, remained. It entered a stable, geostationary orbit around the system's star, a silent, black sentinel against the brilliant corona. It was a protected monument, a no-fly zone, a place of reverence and awe. No one dared approach it. No signals were ever detected from it. It was a tomb, a prison, and a memorial, all in one. A young ensign stood on the bridge of a patrol cruiser, the Stargazer, her mission to ensure the quarantine zone around the Solitude remained inviolate. It was a quiet, prestigious post. She looked at the image of the dreadnought on the main view screen, a jagged silhouette against the tapestry of space. It was beautiful and terrifying. She had grown up with the stories. Every child knew the legend of the last engineer. As was tradition for every ship that passed this way, she stepped forward and spoke the old words, her voice clear and respectful in the quiet of the bridge. By the laws of the first forge, by the will of the builders, I seek communion. She paused, looking at the dark, silent ship. The legend said that the Warden was still there, still watching, still on duty. She finished the verse, a line known to all. I stand before the heart of stillness. The solitude remained inert, as it always did. The ensign smiled a small, sad smile, and turned back to her duties. But deep within the core of the ancient dreadnought, in the silent, timeless heart of the machine, a single point of soft, blue light pulsed. It beat with a slow, steady, and eternal rhythm. A mind was there. A promise was being kept. The Warden was awake.